Now, it's interesting, Alok, that the judge in the order says that what he is considering is whether the argument that this was a place of worship where worship took place incessantly till 1993 and after 1993 once a year is valid or not. Because it appears that the argument put forward by the Hindu side's lawyers is that, look, forget about the 1991 Places of Worship Act. If there was a type of worship which was taking place till 1993, in 1991, and the ruling then doesn't come into play. What evidence is there to suggest, and I quote, that there was a right to worship Ma Shringar Gauri and other visible and invisible deities incessantly till 1993?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, but those questions, the legal questions, will be decided now in a court of law in the next sometime. The first date of hearing or the next date of hearing in all of these cases will be the 22nd of September. I think what we can infer from our understanding of what the judgment is right now, and all of us have just managed to read it very briefly, is that the judge has primarily looked at the Places of Worship Act, like you have been talking about, and also looked at two other acts, Vishnu, one of them being the Waqf Act of 1995 and the other being the Kashi Viswanath Temple Act of 1983. Now, the petitioners or the Mosque committee members had used both these acts to say that these acts also bar the case of the 5 Hindu women. But the judge, Dr. Vishwesh, in his 26-page order has said that that is not the case, and that these both of these acts also do not bar the case of the Hindu women, and it can go ahead. The technicalities or legalities of this, I guess the lawyers are better placed to talk about it. But also to very importantly point out that yes, while there is a lot of euphoria, and so we saw this, I saw it with my own eyes outside this district court, Vishnu, when the petitioners came out, they broke into song and dance, and that's justified because they have secured an important ruling from the court. But at the same time, the main case still has to progress. The main case still has to be heard, and in that main case, both sides will have to make their arguments all over again or come up with new arguments, and only then will the case be actually decided as to whether that year-long worship inside the mosque premises in the Ma Shringar Gauri complex can be permitted, whether there are idols of Hindu gods and goddesses inside the mosque, whether that purported shivling is actually a shivling. All of those things need to be decided in the court of law, adjudicated by a court, and that's going to happen later, starting the 22nd of September.
Fascinating though, Alok, and because it's not something that we've reported before, this line of argument which was raised that forget about 1991 and the ruling over there or the court order over there, there was a certain type of worship till 1993. It's an interesting legal angle to pursue. Obviously the proof is going to have to be provided, and obviously the petitioners haven't revealed what exactly they have, but it's interesting that they would actually not argue openly against 1991, which is also being heard. The validity of the 1991 ruling is also being separately heard, but instead try and bypass it. This is an interesting legal strategy. I don't have a question per se, but any observations that you may have on on this development in court? Can you hear me, Alok?
I'm sorry, was that question for me, Vishnu? I thought
yes,
you had a guest. I'm really sorry.
Alok, go ahead.
Well, I think, like you say, it's indeed a very interesting argument, and the lawyers for the petitioners or for the other side, because the petitioners were the Mosque committee, the lawyers for the other side, Vishnu, claim that in a court of law they can prove that this was a temple, etc. And then there's that lengthy order where where the judge has kind of summarized all kinds of arguments. But I think again it remains to be seen how the case progresses. But this is an important legal victory for sure for those 5 women and their lawyers, because they've managed to not get to have the case proceed. It's not been dismissed, and the judge, like we said, has looked at 3 very important acts, primarily the Places of Worship Act and the other 2 acts, and said that the case can actually proceed.
Question, Alok. Let's look at it from the other standpoint on what exactly the implications of this are. Now, of course it will go to the High Court, of course it will go to the Supreme Court, it's almost certain that it will go. But this is basically, if this is to progress, some would suggest that this actually fundamentally changes the nature of what we are in our country since 1947, where we are entirely multicultural, multi-faith, where majoritarianism has not been, a way in the past, where yes, there have been very strong religious differences, but we've learned to accept those differences. And therefore, if this case were to proceed and a verdict was to go against members of the Muslim community, that would fundamentally change, right? And that's the other side of the argument.
Well, it is, and I can only point to what a prominent cleric just said, and I think we played out his soundbite also. Khalid Rashid Firangi Meli, the top Islamic cleric and the Imam of the Lucknow Eidgah, of the Shahi Eidgah in Lucknow, very influential person, and he said in a statement, in a video statement that his team released, that when the Babri Masjid judgment came through, one hoped that, all of this Hindu, Muslim, and this entire contentious or divisions in civil society would be laid to rest and that the nation could move forward. And he said that with this new judgment, once again perhaps raises the spectre that something like this can actually happen again. And he said that his lawyers will study, or the lawyers working on the case will study the judgment and appeal in a higher court, and that's something that the lawyer did confirm to Saurabh. So that was a given. But yes, concerns, as you point out, about what happens fundamentally in this case, and that's something that even that prominent cleric also referred to.